What is love? Some would consider love to be the most powerful of all emotions. Love gives us the opportunity to connect with the people around us. It excites us, scares us, empowers us, and even controls us. Love gives us strength and makes us weak. Like other emotions, love makes us dynamic individuals. What love and all emotions provide us with is the power to adapt. We can use love to make change in our lives. However, we can also use love to squelch that power. Though we make an attempt to create a solid definition of love, our efforts end in vain. Love is far too complex to confine or to be explained in a sentence. We each have our own definition, which is influenced by our personal experiences with it. Is the feeling I get from someone when I feel like I can't live without them. They make me want to be a better person. I feel like I can't live without that person if I love them. I feel like but I also feel like there are varying degrees of love. So, I may come in contact with someone and they inspire me to make a change in my life, and I feel like that's a form of love. I love my parents, who I've known all my life and who have given me so much, and who have inspired me to be a better person, and I think that's also love.
When I think about love, one of the first words that comes to mind is generosity, which is why the word love reminds me of my aunt. She's just one of the most generous people I know. She's willing to do everything for other people for anything for herself, and that's something that I really admire about her. She's just really super strong, and she's always been a really big influence in my life, and I know that when I love someone, I want to love the way that she loves, because I think that that's the best kind of love that you can give to someone, is the type of love that she gives. This past summer, my grandma passed away, and it was a really hard time for me because I was here 2,000 miles away from home, and she was the one who was calling me, every couple of days, checking in, see how I was coping. It wasn't my mom, it wasn't other people in my family, it was her, because she knew that even though she was grieving herself from losing her mother, she knew that me being 2,000 miles away from home was making it really hard for me to cope with that. So I just appreciate that she's so generous and kind and giving with her love, and that's the type of love that I want to give to other people.
To me, love is something that I feel is a way to make connections with others. It's something that I really haven't thought about a lot, so articulating it is kind of difficult. But I don't know, I feel like I everybody has the capability of experiencing love. It's just how much you are willing to put into that experience in order to get from it what you need.
Our personal definitions are also influenced by the intersections of love and the other emotions it invokes. Love can make us sad. Love can make us feel worthy. Love can move mountains. Love can make us static. Love is also painful. Without love, we cannot experience all other emotions. Without those emotions, we cannot experience love. All emotions are connected, and they do not make sense in the way we currently understand them if one is missing. In James Zull's The Art of Changing the Brain, a work that explores the science behind learning, he suggests that tapping into our emotions provides us with a catalyst for learning. He explains, "Our emotions still seem very important, and if we want to help people learn, we must expect to encounter emotion, and we must take it seriously. If emotion is a catalyst for learning, then we can safely assume that love is one of those catalysts." To gain a better understanding of how this works, let's look at Kolb's learning cycle. According to David Kolb, learning occurs when the learner has first had a concrete experience. This experience is one in which some sort of action has occurred by the learner or to the learner. Second, the learner engages in reflective observation. The learner recalls what happened during the concrete experience, reviewing its details. Then, the learner makes an abstract conceptualization, a moment when the learner connects the experience to past experiences and makes sense of it personally. In this stage of the learning cycle, conclusions are made about the concrete experience, which helps us understand what we would do differently in the future now that we know something new. Finally, the learner engages in active experimentation, in which what was concluded is acted out in a physical manner. To help us understand the learning cycle better, let's look at an example. A woman is walking on the sidewalk in her neighborhood. She trips and falls, causing her pain as she hits the ground. As she picks herself back up, she takes a split second to make sense of her fall, considering what she did in that moment and why she might have fallen. This is not something she is prone to doing, but it has happened to her in the past. She realizes that she was dragging her feet, and by doing so, she put herself in a position in which she was more likely to fall and hit the ground. The woman continues walking, becoming more mindful of her ability to pick her feet up as she is walking. Let's break down the scenario and explore how learning helped the woman correct a situation that could put her in harm's way. The woman had a concrete experience. While walking in her neighborhood, she tripped and fell. This is an observable experience in which the learner felt pain due to her inability to pick her feet up as she was walking. The woman then engaged in reflective observation. As the woman picked herself back up, she went through the experience in her mind, recalling what had just happened. The woman made an abstract conceptualization. After noticing that she had fallen and was dragging her feet, she made a connection between the two, recognizing that dragging her feet, she was increasing her risk of falling. After noticing that she had fallen and was dragging her feet, she made a connection between the two, recognizing that by dragging her feet, she was increasing her risk of falling. She also used a similar experience in the past to help her make the connection between falling and dragging her feet, since this happened prior to the experience we are discussing now. She realized that by picking her feet up, she may reduce her risk of falling. Finally, the woman engaged in active experimentation. She then decided to continue walking, paying particular attention to her ability to pick her feet up. As she walks, she recognizes that by not dragging her feet, she can prevent injury. The cycle can continue as she recognizes the importance of picking her feet up as she walks. Every experience she has walking in the future provides more learning opportunities for her to understand that not dragging her feet will keep her safe.
Now that we have a better understanding of the learning cycle itself, let's take a look at how emotions play a role in that cycle. Zull states that pleasure in learning comes from the perception of progress toward a goal. We find ourselves making the most progress when we use the parts of our brain that have the wiring for our gifts. Success creates enjoyment. He then goes on to share that all points in the learning cycle have the potential for emotional positives and emotional negatives, depending on how successful the learner is and how the teacher plays a significant role in this progression, through the use of challenge and support, and knowing the appropriate times to utilize them. Zull created the following chart to try to capture the emotional cycle that occurs when someone is learning and the role of the person doing the teaching in what he calls the optimal learning model. In the inertia part of the cycle, the teacher must instill some emotional investment in the student. To do this, goals must be created, and they must garner the student's interest, be realistic, and must create a challenge. The student's initial reaction to that challenge could be a negative one, so the teacher must now find a way to move the student into a more positive emotional territory. This is when support comes into the equation. The support allows for the student to have some sort of success, which will lead them to being hopeful and then confident in what they are doing. At this point, the teacher needs to turn over full control and allow the student to take ownership, therefore creating a sense of intrinsic motivation within the student. This is the moment when love gives the student the energy necessary to put the learning cycle into continuous motion. So, experiencing love in the learning cycle for me happened when I learned how to play clarinet. My dad owns a music store, so going into band in 5th grade was like a forced rite of passage in our house. And I did not want to play the clarinet. I wanted to play saxophone, and my dad told me that was too hard for me to learn at first, and that made me really angry, so then I was even more bitter about having to play the clarinet. And I struggled with it for a while just because I was really uninterested in it, and I just wasn't putting in the time to learn it. But I luckily had a really awesome teacher who spent extra time with me, like helping me figure out everything, and hitting high notes that are really hard to hit. And so eventually I got to a point where I kind of became obsessed with it a little bit. and I loved it. I spent like extra hours practicing beyond the required hours that we had to every week, and I ended up playing clarinet from 5th grade until my sophomore year of college.
As we have noticed, love is a necessary part of the learning process in individuals. Likewise, love is also a key component of learning within organizations. Organizations need to be infused with love in order to be able to grow, thrive, and change. It is a necessary resource for sustaining life. We see love in organizations through the relationships and networks that people create with one another. Think back to a time you worked in a group where there was not an emphasis placed on building and maintaining relationships. What were your feelings toward that group? What did you learn from that group?
For me, an experience I've had in a loveless organization was when I worked at Subway one summer in between years of college, and it was very mechanical in nature. Everybody had their task. If you stepped out of doing your task, things got like insane. People got really upset and thought that you were taking over their work. I remember like every single day I had to cut tomatoes, and it was the worst thing ever. But I was the person that cut tomatoes. Like nobody else was ever asked to cut tomatoes. So it was just a very like mechanical way of organizing an organization, and nobody really had relationships.
Relationships are important in organizational growth. Without these relationships, processes become static. Often individuals find themselves bored just going through the motions. Think of a loveless organization as resembling a machine. Sure, the task at hand may get completed, and yes, it probably is in a very efficient way. However, what is the outcome besides the product? In a machine model of organization, people are viewed as parts of the machine that work in silos. If someone within the organization fails, rather than the organization nurturing the individual to help them learn from mistakes, the individual becomes disposable. Relationships create investment of the organization in the individual, as well as the individual within the organization. Margaret Wheatley's Leadership and the New Science, Discovering Order in a Chaotic World, explains that playing into one's intrinsic motivation allows us to view ourselves as whole humans rather than separating personal and professional lives. People are appreciated for who they are rather than what they do. Investment creates the bonds that make it more difficult to let someone become replaceable. Investment creates motivation within individuals as well as opportunities for love to proliferate. With relationships and love come the ability to trust one another. According to Wheatley, when trust is present, information is able to flow freely throughout a network. We all crave knowledge. Our information shared is nourishment, which subsequently makes relationships stronger. The strengthened relationships and the free-flowing information allow organizations to learn and thrive in constantly changing environments that may seem chaotic and difficult. Since the environment is never stable, the organization's ability to learn is necessary for its survival.
To help organizations and individuals learn, we must recognize the connection between emotion and learning. Knowing how important emotions are to learning and that love is such a powerful emotion, we must ask ourselves, how can we infuse love into our lives? What does this look like? In reference to love and giving to others, Parker Palmer states in his work, Let Your Life Speak, "When I give something I do not possess, I give a false and dangerous gift. A gift that looks like love, but is, in reality, loveless. A gift given more from my need to prove myself than from the other's need to be cared for." We must make sure that the love we are giving is true love and is coming from an honest place. In doing so, we can create a powerful space for learning to occur.